we're in. If you don't know anything about me or who I am, I wouldn't be so worried about that yet, because I'm going to dive into what's in it for you guys today. And I want to talk about how I can help you guys. And at the end of the video, if you are so curious as to who I am, I'm going to be covering who I am, where I come from, how I started cooking, places I've worked at, different cuisines I do, what I do now, and how I got there. And how I got there is actually following some of the advice that I want to give to you guys today. So today's video is the 10 things you should be working on if you have 5 years or less experience in the kitchen. And if that sounds like you, then you have found the right video. And do I have a whole lot of viewers right now? No. Do I have a whole lot of subscribers right now? No. But do I have a whole lot of experience? Yes. For those of you that don't know, I have a shit ton of experience in vlogging and Instagramming and Facebooking and TikToking, and that's where all my views and followers are. I am new to YouTube, but I'm not new to making content. So without further ado, let's dive into the first thing you should be working on if you have 5 years or less experience in the kitchen, and that is knife skills. So a lot of people tell you to work on your knife skills, but a lot of people don't tell you how to work on your knife skills. And in today's day and age with the internet, instead of like focusing on like the fundamentals of knife skills and searching up how to cut and slice 15 different vegetables and cuts of meat, you just want to search up how to cut an onion, because there's 26 different ways. I believe there's 26 total different ways to cut an onion. And you want to search up how to cut an onion, and then you'll find all the ways to cut an onion. And make sure you have an onion at hand and a knife and a cutting board to actually demonstrate and do your practicing with. A lot of practice in today's day and age is done without actually practicing. And a lot of people spend a lot of time learning about things, but not actually doing it. So if you don't have a kitchen that you can work in at home to practice these extra knife skills on, then I highly suggest you ask your head chef at your job, because I'm assuming you work in a kitchen and that's how you found this video. Ask your kitchen manager or your head chef if you can have some extra time at the beginning or the end of the day to work on things like knife skills, and make sure it applies to prep that actually needs to be done in the kitchen. Maybe he'll save a few jobs for you that require those skills. And that's how you really, really, really improve your knife skills. Like, there's so many different ways to cut every single different kind of vegetable. I can't get into it, or nor can I demonstrate for you in this video, because this is just a podcast from a video. But I can say, if you look up how to cut a jalapeno, you'll find out how to cut a jalapeno. If you look up how to cut an onion, how to cut a carrot, how to do this, how to do that, and then you might find a really fancy video that elevates you even more, showing you that if you take a cucumber and slide it directly down a mandolin at a very thin setting, you can get sheets of cucumber, cut off the edges and twirl them and pickle them in something like beet juice. And then once you've twirled the cucumber and pickled it in beet juice, it will have turned pink from the purple juice, and then you have like this pink strand of pickled cucumber that you can like lay all over the dish, and it looks super artistic. And that started off with how to cut a cucumber. And then you discover things. When you are 5 years or less in the kitchen, generally, and don't worry, there's more topics. We're going to get into it, but we're still in knife skills right now. Number 1, knife skills. But generally, when you're 5 years or less in a kitchen, you are on the prep side of things. You are on the third cook end of things on line cooking. But for the most part, I remember when I was younger, I worked at not going to tell you where I work yet. We'll get into that later. But I was a prep cook. I was a breakfast prep cook for my early years. And that's how I learned how to cut fruit. And cutting fruit taught me how to cut anything. So when it comes to knife skills, if there's anything that I can tell you on how to really improve your knife skills, is if you can carve watermelon and carve cantaloupe and carve honeydew and carve all those fruits that are bigger and more intricate, and you can make a really nice fruit platter out of it that looks artistic, and cut it into triangles and make rose shapes out of things and all that. Like, all that stuff is possible, but like that's where my knife skills really elevated. As soon as I could make artistic fruit platters out of any fruit that you could throw at me, then cutting vegetables wasn't so hard. Because typically with cutting vegetables, you're doing a julienne, which is a thin slice, you're doing a dice, you're doing a 1/4 inch dice, you're doing a 1/2 inch dice, those sorts of things. And it's more so 90-degree angles and easier shit. But like when you're carving a watermelon, you have to get right on the edge of where the white meets the red and the actual edible part, the red part of the watermelon, and you have to cut down and around, and your knife blade actually bends as you're doing it, and it takes a lot more technique to maybe cut it off and have no white showing, which is what should happen. Or some people cut it off and they cut off too much of the red, and some people cut it off and they didn't cut off enough of the skin, and there's still a white layer over top of it that's showing. So if you really want to work on your knife skills, to conclude it all, look up vegetables individually on how to cut them, and up your game on your fruit carving skills, because fruit will really take you far in your knife skills. And then you can focus on the butchery side of things later on. But if you're in your first 5 years of cooking, I don't think anyone's letting you cut steaks yet. So I'm not really going to cover that right now. So let's hop into number 2, time management. In a kitchen, actually, you know what? I spent a lot of time on knife skills there, so like I'm going to conclude something here because these all have something to do with each other. Because number 2, 3, and 4 all have something to do with each other. Number 2 is time management. Number 3 is organization. And number 5 is communication. Number 4 is communication. When you're working on your time management skills, if you're organized and you're mise en place, aka everything in its place, a lot of people hear mise en place and they don't actually know what it means, and they're too afraid to ask. So I'll tell you, mise en place means everything in its place in French. That's what it means. So if you have everything in its place and you're organized and you've covered number 3 on the list, then number 2 becomes a lot easier because your time management has been managed because you spent a lot of time organizing before the rush came in, before your shift started. A big heads up on how to get ahead of this is show up to work half an hour early and be dressed and ready with your apron on, 2 towels ready, chef coat on if it's required to wear a chef coat at that kitchen, hat, come back down, and immediately start on something 15 minutes before you start. Because if you're 15 minutes ahead of yourself for the whole shift, you'll be ready for service half an hour to 45 minutes before service starts. Whereas we all know most cooks, even the experienced ones, they're ready for service 10 to 15 minutes before service starts. That's when their final line checks are done and everything's been managed, right? So communication, that was the third one, right? So with organization and time management and unity and synchronicity with each other, then communication should be easy because you're not trying to hide anything. Communication falls in restaurants with someone trying to hide their mistake or not getting found out that they're the one that overcooked the steak. Nobody wants to be the one that gets busted for the mistake in a kitchen. And that's where communication really falls. Communication doesn't fall in prep. Everybody knows what has to be done. It doesn't fall in line setup. Everybody knows what's going on. It falls in service when things come back or things didn't go as planned or things are taking longer than usual. All of a sudden, nobody wants to communicate anymore because even the person that did know who did it isn't going to say who did it because no one's a rat, right? So the number one way to solve your communication in a kitchen, if you're 5 years or less specifically, is just stay out of it. It's not even your fucking problem yet. Like, just do you, cook your shit on time, plate your shit on time, put your shit out on the window on time, take care of you, and make sure that you're always keeping yourself safe from being the problem. I can't fix communication in a restaurant. I don't think anybody can because it's jaggedy at times. But the more you cover your own ass, the less you have to communicate to someone that you made a mistake, or the less you have to hide from someone that you made a mistake. Which brings us to our next point. I wrote these all out in such a unison form. So yeah, just to remind everybody, we're 10 minutes into the video now. I will be covering who I am, where I'm from, and all about me at the end of this video. And there's also a bonus tip at the end of these 10 tips. But right now we're going to get to number 5. And that is food safety. Speaking of communication, organization, and time management, food safety comes in next. Because I don't know if anyone's ever told you this, but when someone's allergic to shellfish allergies, or allergies. When someone's allergic to shellfish and they have allergies, they become not okay when they eat shellfish. They will puff up like someone that's eaten a peanut that's allergic to peanuts. Their throats will start to close. They will begin to suffocate and sweat, and it can cause tearing in the throat and internal bleeding that causes them to choke to death before they ever get help. That is what happens. So when you see a ticket come in and it's sitting right in front of you up here and it says shellfish allergy, here's the number one thing that you should do about shellfish allergies or any allergies. For one, if it's peanut allergies, restaurants, where I'm from anyway, just don't really serve with peanuts anymore to just avoid peanut allergies. But shellfish allergies, you want to serve shellfish in your fucking restaurant because a lot of people can't eat it. But here's how to get around always having a plan no matter what time of day this bill comes in for a shellfish allergy, you're prepared. You get what's called a big Cambro, the big plastic bins at work, and you grab a wok or a pan or a pot or whatever they cook most of everything in. Put one of everything in that bin. Some tongs, some spatulas. It's called your allergy kit, and it doesn't get touched, and you just leave it on the top shelf on the line. And when something comes in, any allergy, a gluten allergy, a whatever the fuck allergy, you pull down your allergy kit and you have clean stuff to cook their food in that hasn't touched anything. So all you have to do is wash your hands. You don't have to run around washing pots and pans and making sure everything's clean for this allergy. You just have an allergy kit off to the side. We're going to veer off from all the boring stuff like time management and safety and stuff, but that is the stuff that I wanted to get out right away because it is the most important stuff for you to be aware of when you're 5 years or less, because those things that you are aware of, like once you are aware of those things, you become easier to work with and you become more efficient. So the next thing we're going to get into is creativity. If you do not have a kitchen that you can cook in on your own time, your tactic is going to be trying to get in on the specials that your restaurant is featuring. When your chefs feature specials, try to get in on the creative work. Try to come to him with good ideas often enough that every once in a while maybe he'll let you try one, or tell him, hey, I'm real about this and I actually want to be a chef and I want to be able to create food. I don't have a kitchen at home I can do this in. I'm not making enough money to buy all the groceries to be able to do this. I want to be able to learn. Can I be part of the creative process with you? And then he'll teach you how to create a dish. So one way that I can teach you how to create a dish without even showing you or demonstrating right now is just giving you the number one piece to the puzzle that nobody knows. There are 3 components to a dish on average, and this does not cover every dish ever, but generally it's a protein, whether it's tofu or lentils, a vegetable, or red meat. There's a protein, there's a starch, like something like wild rice or arborio rice or Yukon Gold potatoes, a starch, and a vegetable. Protein, starch, veg. That's all you need to know for creating a dish. What goes with that? A garnish and a sauce. If it's a breakfast, it's protein, starch, fruit. And the fruit replaces the vegetable. Think of every breakfast restaurant you've ever gone to. You've got pancakes with whipped cream, with toast, with sausages, with like a little cup of like cantaloupe and strawberries and grapes and blueberries, right? Because there's no vegetable portion in a breakfast. They replace it with a fruit. So those are some things that I can tell you right off the bat that will help you out with your creativity, but you have to be like, dude, especially if you're in the 3 to 5 year range into your career, then you should really start working on your creativity, because once you hit 6 or 7 years in, someone's going to ask you to make something because they just think you're capable of that. And if you've never done it, then it's really going to show. And it's like, these days, a lot of you didn't smoke weed with your friends in a tunnel underneath a train station, smoking a bunch of weed, doing a bunch of graffiti, doing a bunch of bad things, and it shows. So in the opposite spectrum, I can say in the cooking industry, if you're not creating your own food, eventually it's going to show, because you're going to hit this point where you're so experienced in restaurants and people are going to think that you know how to make shit, and they're just going to ask you how to make shit, and you're going to luckily, I started creating food before that ever happened to me. So when it did first happen to me, I was like, oh, thank God I was prepared for that. Because if I didn't know that a dish was made out of a protein, a starch, and a veg, then how would I have ever made a dinner special? Right? And these are the things that you got to think about that are going to elevate your career. I have been at sous chef level, so I do know that these things elevate you and make people think that you are of the person that is prepared to be a sous chef. And someone that's 5 years in can definitely be a sous chef, but I can almost promise if you're 5 years in and you're a sous chef, you got it too early. That's a conversation for another day. But we're going to get into number 7, taste. I highly suggest that you pick a cook friend that you work with and do like a taste testing thing where everyone's blindfolded and you have to like guess what you're tasting. Because when you're doing the taste as you go in a kitchen, like when you're tasting your work as you're going and you're throwing away those tasting spoons, hopefully, and not reusing them in your food, you have to know what you're tasting for. Like a lot of people tell you taste as you go in a kitchen, but no one tells you what you're tasting for. When you're cooking mussels, they come from the ocean. You're still going to have to season it with salt, but those things are salty as fuck already. So you're going to probably want to pull back on your salt a little bit. So when you're cooking mussels and you're tasting the sauce for the mussels, you're not tasting how your mussels turned out. You know they're cooked. They popped right open and you can see them. You're tasting the sauce for how salty it is. If you're doing something like you work at a ramen restaurant and you're tasting the broth, you're tasting it for how much umami are you feeling, which is the balance of sweet, salty, and savory all at once. That's umami. When you're tasting demi-glaze, you're tasting for the wine reduction because it's half water, half red wine in the beginning of the recipe for the demi-glaze. And after the full reduction, you're tasting for, is the liquor completely cooked out? Because you want the liquor completely cooked out and you just want the taste from the berries of the wine in the sauce. So for every individual thing that you're tasting, you have to know why you're tasting it. And if you do blind tastings and you're just really good at knowing what you're tasting, it'll increase how well you are at gauging your cooking when you can see it. All right, we're going to go into cleanliness, and this one's going to be super quick. It's called CYAG, CYAG, clean as you go. Yeah, I don't know, clean as you go. That's the saying. I got the acronym wrong completely. But your chef is going to hate you if you're a dirty chef. He's not going to want to buy you a nice cool apron to wear at work if you're always getting it covered in tomato sauce. And especially if you work at a pizza place and tomato sauce is enemy number one when it comes to messes, you should really work on not getting tomato sauce on yourself. And I know this sounds petty, but it shows through the professionalism, and it shows your chef how much you care about your job when you're very clean and organized at your station. It's like, let's say the registry is up on your car and you need to go to your local registry to get your plates renewed. And you're sitting at the guy's desk and there's papers everywhere and his shit's a mess. He doesn't even know where his stapler is and he needs it to put your paperwork all together in a file, and then he doesn't know where a file is. It just shows that he's bad at his job all around. There's not a single aspect of that guy's job performance that I trust. You know what I mean? And if that's you at work where you're always in a mess, that's all it takes to become that guy in a kitchen. Teamwork. Teamwork can be paired up with creativity because, like I said, you can ask your chef, may I be a part of the creative process when it comes to specials because I don't have a kitchen to cook in or whatever, right? The teamwork comes into value when it comes to learning from each other, especially when you're 3 to 5 years in, 2 years in, 1 year in, anywhere from 0 to 5 years. You are the student in the room, which means everybody around you, pretty much no matter what, has more experience than you, which means everybody around you has a lot to teach you. And you want to become a valuable team member in the way that, think about, like, see these hockey jerseys hanging up in my room? That might give away where I'm from, but in hockey, there's the first line, the second line, the third line, and the fourth line. The first and second line are your top 6 forwards. They're going to bring you all your points, and then your supporting roles are in the third and fourth line. When you're 0 to 5 years in the kitchen, you are third line tops, meaning that there's a lot of window for opportunity for you, but you might not be as talented as the first and second line. You might not be as valued as the first or second line, but you can be a team player in the way that nobody else can because you have the time to be that team player because you're not taking on the workload of the people on the first and the second line or the chef de parties and the sous chefs and the first cooks. You're not taking on that workload. So you have the time to be the ultimate team player. If you see that their bin is full, because everybody has bins on the ground in the kitchen, I hope, that has like empty inserts in it, empty bottles in it, you pick it up and you bring it to the dish guy. If you see the dish guy needs help, then run some dishes for him. And like, you're probably working Grand Manger Apps dessert station, the less busy station. So you can support the grill and the saute and be the best team player there is. And that will bump you forward like no other, like all the other tips that I'm giving out. We're going to get into the number 10 tip here, the very last tip. Passion. The last tip is to have passion. And what does it mean to have passion? Passion doesn't mean, oh, I love this. Oh, this makes me feel amazing. That's just a good feeling. Passion is something that you are dedicated to thick and through. Passion is a marriage. Passion is a marriage to your, how do I say it? Your hobby that slowly becomes a career. Most people are passionate about their hobbies. Most people just think that you should work for your money so you can spend it on the things you love. But any chef out there, any cook out there that feels in any way that I feel knows that it feels way better to do your passion for a living because then you're always doing what you love even when you're on the clock. That's how it should feel. I'm not going to get too deep into it because we are 22 minutes in here and I hope you guys are still with me. I hope this has been an engaging video. But we're actually going to get into the bonus tip. This tip isn't typical like the other tips. The other tips are tips that you need to know. So they're on the more typical side, but you need to know, and I hope I had a creative way of explaining it. But this tip is way more in depth in the sense that you need to add to your employee experience at work. You as an individual need to add to the employee experience by giving everybody great times and awesome memories and doing things outside and in, like at work and outside of work with your employees that make memorable times, that make them excited to come back to work. Oftentimes it is the head chef's job to create the culture of the kitchen and to create the vibe of the kitchen and how everyone's going to be. But they're so busy being a head chef that they don't always have time to come into the kitchen and huddle everyone up and have this big ceremony where everyone's like, yeah, what are we going to do today? Blah, blah, blah. Like sometimes you guys need to create that culture for yourself in the kitchen, because no one else is going to do it for you, and do it in spite of the fact that no one else is going to do it for you. Add to your employee experience. That's the bonus tip. All right. So if you enjoyed this, then maybe you'll enjoy hearing about me as a person, because this is the end of the video now. So I'm going to get into the end-ish of the video. I'm going to get into where I come from and how I got into cooking. So my name is Joshua B. Boyd, Chef Joshua B. Boyd, as you can see right here on YouTube. I am from Canada. I was born on the east side of Canada, 4 hours north of Toronto in a city called Sudbury. And then I was raised in Airdrie, Alberta, which is on the west side, the Midwest of Canada, closer to Montana, about 5-6 hours away from Montana. And I learned how to cook mostly in the Rocky Mountains in a city called Canmore in Kananaskis in Banff. I went to culinary school at the Art Institute of Vancouver in 2016. That was 3 years after I graduated high school. I had 3 years cooking experience by the time I went to culinary school. I graduated top of my class. I got into cooking because I was working at a warehouse after high school ended, just like picking orders for the semi truck driver to pick up. Like I was literally just walking around reading barcodes because there was no computers to do that at the time, I guess. There probably was. I probably just had a shitty job, but like I had to go out and read barcodes and find the exact item that someone ordered online and bring it to the front for it to be loaded onto a semi truck for it to be driven away. And I had a friend named Clarice, and she was working at Hotel Arts Oxbow at a restaurant. No, sorry, Hotel Arts Raw Bar at a restaurant called Raw Bar, which was right next to a restaurant called Yellow Door, which was a guy named Duncan Lee was the head chef of both of those restaurants. And she's like, hey, I'm having a lot of fun time. This is the number one restaurant in the city. We're hiring right now. She's like, you have a bit of retail experience working at the mall. She's like, that's all they're looking for. She's like, we're looking for a host. And she's like, Josh, you're going to meet a lot of famous people if you do this. And I was like, what do you mean I'm going to meet a lot of famous people if I do this? Well, lo and behold, Hotel Arts was right down the road from our Saddle Dome, which is our big hockey arena, which is where big concerts are, the hockey games are, the BMO Center, which is where more concerts and events are. And Hotel Arts was like the bougie little art hotel where famous people like to stay when they're in town because it's right down the road from wherever their venue is. And so I got to meet like Rick Mercer, Alexis Knapp from Pitch Perfect 2 and Pitch Perfect 1. I got to meet Billy Talent. I got to meet a lot of people to the point where I don't even know who I've met. I've probably met them. But I was a host working in the front of house in the restaurant. And every time I went back to the kitchen to like throw dishes away at the dish area or whatever, or hang out with some of the servers in our like little hangout area where the food comes up, I was always watching the cooks doing like crazy knife work, and like I was watching top tier cooking, you guys. Like this was like there's no Michelin stars in Canada at the time, but this was a Michelin star level restaurant for sure. And I'm always seeing this crazy cooking going on, and I'm just 18 years old and I'm just absorbed by it. So I asked Duncan Lee, the chef of that restaurant, how do I become a chef? And he said, well, I can't hire you here because it's not in your ballpark yet, but he's like, start with the first meal of the day. He's like, everybody's going to want you to be a breakfast cook when you're inexperienced. He's like, you better just volunteer for it and get it out of the way so that you can get onto the real shit as fast as possible. But he's like, never, ever have a lower standard than wanting to be at a restaurant like this. He's like, this is the goal. He's like, if your goal isn't this, then don't waste your fucking time. Nobody wants to be the head chef of Denny's or Smitty's. You know what I mean? So I got a job at a breakfast restaurant in Airdrie. Nothing fancy. Just poaching eggs, sneezing from vinegar all day and boiling water, cutting onions, doing my thing. And then I went to be a breakfast cook at a banquet hotel or at a hotel that hosted banquets. And I was like a breakfast cook there for like another year. And I did like groups of 500 to 1,000 every other day, but it was like the worst cooking you could ever do, like nothing fancy. And then I was fed up with it, so I lied my way into a fine dining restaurant in Canmore that was doing Canadian cuisine, nouveau Canadian cuisine. That's what they were calling it, and I fucking fell in love with it. And I learned so much shit. Like, dude, like if you're fed up with where you are in the kitchen because you don't feel like you're doing cool enough food, just go to a really nice place and lie out of your ass. They know you're doing it. We all do it. I found out in Anthony Bourdain's book that he lied his way into his first kitchen. I lied my way into my first real kitchen. And it's just kind of like the way to go. They know you're going to suck ass, but like they're willing to teach you. They just don't tell you that. They're making it harder than it is. But like if you're fed up with where you are in the kitchen based on the level of cooking that you're doing and you feel like you want to do some fancier shit, just go for it. And that's how I'm going to end this video. I hope these tips helped you. And yeah, have a good day, guys.